You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
It's McGuire Mondays with Pierre McGuire, Dan O'Toole. And Pierre, this year's Toronto Maple Leafs team has managed to do something that no Leafs team has done in the last, 10, 15 years. And that is lose a fan base. I did an informal poll with 3 Leaf fan buddies today, and they said, get rid of everyone. We don't care about a single player on this team.
You know what's really cool? Number one, you live in an informed hockey area. Number two, I know the fans in your area have unbelievable passion. That is the Toronto Maple Leafs organization. And the third thing is there's some salvageable pieces there. But this is a team now that's got to recognize it's time to sell. They'll join a group that's including other teams in the league where you look at and you say, Florida, it's time for you to sell. New York Rangers, it's time for you to sell. Philadelphia Flyers, it's time for you to sell. So now you got to be establishing price points on players. The question is, who's going to be making those decisions in terms of establishing price points? Who's going to be your number one marketing person in the front office of the hockey operations? That's one of the biggest conundrums facing Keith Pelley right now on the Toronto Maple Leafs. If Brad Treliving's that guy, that's fine. But if he's not, who's going to help him?
And when you're establishing a price point, teams know the situation you're in, so you aren't going to get the most for your dollar.
Probably not. And so that's why you got to identify players that you think are redundant in your organization. So let's just use this as an example of what I'm talking about. You've got Nicky Roy, who's done some good things for Toronto, and you got Scott Lawton, who's done some good things and some not so good things. So those guys are basically the same player. You can have your own opinion who's better, but they're pretty close to having the same role. Do you have to keep both, or can you move one? I think you could probably move one and still be able to go forward with your group. So that's kind of the stuff, the internal exercise they're probably trying to look at now, Dan, and if they're not, they should get to it pretty quick.
The stock on these players has fallen so much that even mentioning trading Austin Matthews barely warrants the raise of an eyebrow from these fans. They're like, I don't care. Just do something different with this team. Would Austin Matthews, is he on the block?
I don't think so. I'd be really surprised. I think they recognize they got bullied into making the Mitchell Marner deal, and it didn't work out. It blew up in their face. And so I don't think they're going to be bullied or pushed around by what the media thinks, what the fan base thinks. Now you got to get hardcore hockey decision makers that really understand the overall strength of each team in the NHL, the overall weakness of each team in the NHL, and where you fit in terms of both those questions. These are things that should have been going on for the entire season, and I'm sure they have been. And if they haven't been, shame on them. Shame on them in their front office. I believe they've probably been having these discussions. And people say, well, how do you know that? If they're not having those discussions, then I'm worried about the well-being of the league, because that's just protocol. That's proper practice for an NHL organization, Dan. My biggest thing, though, is you can't just throw everybody out. Does Bobby McMahon have value around the league? I think he does. Is he worth a first-round pick? Probably not. But you got to see. You got to ask. You got to put him out there. And you got to wonder about Morgan Riley. What's his value to a team that thinks they got a legitimate chance to win the Stanley Cup? Let's just say, for the sake of argument, a team like Colorado, that you need depth on defense. And so you got to look at all these different things when you're making these decisions.
I'm glad you brought up Mitch Marner, because one of the ardent Leaf fans that I spoke to said, I asked him, I said, where did this team lose you? And they are like the breaking up with the ex, and then you're like, maybe I had it pretty good with the ex. They said, when they traded Mitch Marner, I think that's where I stopped caring about this team.
I think right from the start, I thought it was a terrible mistake. I talked about it with Kyle. I talked about it with you. Last spring when they had the disaster, and then they came out, their words, not Dan's, not Kyle's, not Pierre's, their words were, we're going to change the DNA of this team. So they thought part of changing the DNA was moving on from Mitchell Marner. I'm not sure that was right, and we said it at the time, and I still don't believe it's right. And you can see the setbacks. You can see what it did to their power play. You can see what it's done to their penalty kill, and you can see what it's done to Austin Matthews. But what it's done even worse for Matthew Nyes. This is one of the biggest pending questions for this group going forward. how are they going to get Matthew Nyes back on track? He was trending to be one of the top power forwards in the National Hockey League. He's not trending like that anymore. They got to find a way to get him back on the right path.
So this team comes out of the Olympic break. Had they won their first 3 games out of the gate, you said it wouldn't have mattered. The team's in the same situation, but they lose all 3. Yep. Now they're stuck in a situation which, well, if we win more, then we kind of screw our future. They are in no man's land now.
So what I love about coming on with you is you do things that are serious, but you do them in a really good way. You make people kind of feel cool about listening to you. And so I'm going to try to do the same thing. I'm going to take a page out of Dan O'Toole's playbook. They stunk in Tampa, Dan. They were bad. They were really bad in the first period in Florida, Dan. They weren't a little bit bad. They were really bad. And after Morgan Rielly scored to open the game on Saturday night, they were abysmal. They were bad. And so there's a trend there. And the trend is that these guys don't care about the season. And they can say whatever they want. They're the ones that created the storyline. Dan didn't do it. Kyle didn't do it. Pierre didn't do it. And I don't mean Kyle Dubas, by the way. See, I told you I'd get you to be a Dan O'Toole for a day. And so they gotta be realistic about this as a management team and an ownership group and start to make the appropriate moves. And I was doing a list of teams, and you think about it. The Leafs would be in there with some pretty heavy competition in terms of moving players. New York Rangers have already started. They moved Panarin. They have. I mean, that's the reality. The Colorado Avalanche went out and made a trade. They moved a defenseman that had been there for a lot of years. They moved him to Pittsburgh. You can start looking at what's going on. I think the Florida Panthers are going to start to be really aggressive, Dan. I really do. And so you start looking at that. And you start to say, okay, where does Toronto fit in? Because you got to be proactive as a group right now, very proactive.
I'm a focus on the day you're on, don't focus on anything else. The Leafs can't be in that situation.
Right.
And now Leaf fans are pointing to, hey, look what the Montreal Canadiens did. Look how quickly they turned things around after a mini rebuild. I want to do that. Can the Toronto Maple Leafs look at what the Habs did and copy that blueprint?
So here's how that rebuild started. Mark Bergevin deserves credit along with his scouting staff for taking the 15th overall pick in his draft year 2019 as Cole Caulfield. Cole Caulfield is going to be over 45 goals this year. It's unbelievable what he's doing. So that was a 15th overall pick. I'll just use, you asked me the question about Montreal. Mm-hmm. Mark Bergevin also had a chip in the game named Max Pacioretty. He traded Max Pacioretty to Vegas, and if they had a redo, they would not have traded Nick Suzuki to Montreal. So basically, he traded an aging veteran winger for an unbelievably good, youthful number 1 potential center iceman, who is now a number 1 center iceman. So that starts your rebuild pretty quick. Then they stole in the second round Lane Hudson. That was an absolute steal, but that was done by Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton. So you start to look at what's the blueprint. Then they take a player like Jacob Fowler in the third round, who's going to be a franchise goalie, who's ripping up the American Hockey League right now after being unbelievable at Boston College. I can go down the line. There's subtle little pieces that were put into place. You can't say that Toronto, even though Ben Danford's a good player playing for Brantford, you can't say that Toronto has one player like Lane Hudson coming through their system. You can't say that Toronto has one player coming through their system like Jacob Fowler. Even though Dennis Hildeby's good, he will never be as good as Jacob Fowler. So this is the problem. They've got to find a way to get better at doing the draft. They need a time machine. The Leafs need to go back in time if they want to copy the Habs. Yeah, I would say, but it also comes down to, like, Slav, they finished so poorly that they drafted number 1 after winning the lottery, and they struck gold without listening to the fans, by the way. They took Slafkovsky. There was such a push. Take Logan Cooley. I was there. I was doing the draft. Take Logan Cooley. The people were yelling it. They took Slafkovsky. 17-year-old who was the MVP of the Olympics in Beijing. 7 goals he scored, no assists, 7 goals. He was the MVP of the tournament. He just shredded another Olympic tournament for Slovakia. He's having an amazing year playing as a second-line left winger for the Montreal Canadiens. This guy's going to be one of the ultimate power forwards in the league. They were lucky. They got him in the draft. They didn't listen to the quote unquote experts. They went out and did what their scouts told them to do.
And this Habs team, you can tell that the fans care about this club. They are invested. And that right there, watching them develop before your eyes, that gives you what the Leafs don't have right now. And that is a connection to the fan base.
Oh, that's so perfect. That's such a good way to phrase it. So Caden Gooley, fans love him because he's fiery, he's physical, he's aggressive. They love Arbor Jacki. Same thing. He's like, quote unquote, the sheriff. Lane Hudson has become this superstar before their eyes. You look at what's going on with Ivan Demidov as a second line right winger. You look at the development of Oliver Kapanen, who was a point and game player in the SHL with Timro. I can go down the line, Dan, with all these guys. You're right. The fans are invested because they love the players and the team. The fact they played in the playoffs last year and lost in the first round of Washington, that was like money in the bank for those fans. They loved that. And now they're watching this team play. Every night they go to the rink, they know one thing. They're going to be entertained. They may not win every game, but they know they're going to be entertained.
And to watch a game in Montreal, it's like visiting the pearly gates before you get there. It's just... with Jay and I have an old friend, Jim Pearl. He was a stagehand at our time in Fox, an older gentleman. He's like, let's meet up in Montreal. He said, I want to go to a Montreal Canadiens game. And it was the last game 2 or 3 years ago where they beat like Florida 9-3.
Okay.
So we're standing up after every goal. And he's like, is it like this every game? So his experience, he got to see 9 goals. But him watching his first ever NHL game in Montreal where the Habs put up 8 or 9 goals, he's like, this is the greatest sport on earth. So if you ever have a fan in your life that's never been to a game in person, bring them to Montreal for their first game.
It's fair.
Because you can't get better than that.
No, it's really fair to say that. I'm spoiled because as a kid growing up, I went to probably the Mecca. I know in Toronto they think it's Maple Leaf Gardens. I was at the Forum, and as a kid, I was there all the time. Unless I was playing in a hockey game, I was outside the Forum all the time.
Oh, the best. Okay, so Pierre, what do the Leafs do? What can they do?
I think they have an organized plan for sale.
Okay.
So you identify the players that you think could probably bring you back the most compensation, and then you go forward from there. So that's why I brought up the redundancy thing. Do you really need Nick Roy and Scott Laughton, or can one be disposed? And I don't mean
now. Sorry to interrupt, but bring us behind the curtain. How does this work? Is there a call already into every other team, or do teams just know you're accepting calls?
No, teams know you're open for business. They know you're accepting calls. And also, one of the unseen parts of this, pro scouts travel in packs usually, and they're usually in touch with their general managers or their senior vice presidents on a daily basis. And you can say, hey, Dan, you and I are working for, you're working for Detroit, I'm working for Toronto. This is all hypothetical. And I say, hey, you know what? I know you guys are looking for a second center. We might not have that, but we do have a third center. And this is who we're thinking about moving. And so when you start hearing all these insiders say, well, this guy's available or that guy's available, it's because the pro scouts are talking in the press boxes and all the media is there, and that's what happens. So you get the message out any way you can. And one of the quick ways is the general manager say, hey, look, Doug Armstrong's already done it. We're open for business. We're ready to make some moves. And so St. Louis is one of those teams. And that's how you do it.
Yeah. Or just put a sign out in front of Scotiabank Arena. We're open. No, all offers will be considered.
Yeah, why not? I remember when somebody said there's no way, it was in August when Wayne Gretzky got traded from Edmonton to LA. And I happened to be at the State Fairgrounds in Syracuse, New York. I was coaching at St. Lawrence University, watching the Empire State Games, which is all the best players in the state of New York would go and play for different teams from their area. And it was really fertile scouting ground. And there were a bunch of NHL guys there, a bunch of college. And then all of a sudden, there was no talk radio back then. There was no cell phones. And the rumors started getting out that Gretzky got traded from Edmonton to LA. And everybody's like, no way, it could never happen, not a chance. And then all of a sudden you go back to your hotel room and you turn on the news and you see the press conference. And it did happen. And I know people say this all the time, and I will repeat what people say. If Wayne Gretzky could get traded, anybody could get traded.
100%. Hey, can we play
We can do
1 degree of Pierre McGuire?
We can do anything.
Okay, this is where I point to a hockey card behind me, and Pierre gives me his connection to this player. So I'm going to go very top middle. Lucien Dubois.
Lucien Deblois. Is
I don't remember him.
one of the strongest men that ever played in the National Hockey League. He was physically a bull moose. I've had a chance to spend so much time with him. He played for the Rangers for a long time, played for Montreal for a long time. His son.
This is him as a Leaf, this guy.
Yeah, well, Lucien's been around. He was around. He played in a lot of places. His son scouts right now for the Ottawa Senators. Lucien is a fantastic guy. One of my real heroes in hockey was the late John Ferguson Sr. He was an amazingly tough man. And when Fergie was running the Rangers, he had Lucien playing there. And I remember one night, Fergie said to me, "Who do you think the strongest guy is in the history of the NHL?" I said, "I don't know, Barry Beck." Like, he was really strong. He goes, "Nope." He goes, "Lucien Deblois." He was unbelievably strong. He had the strength of a lumberjack. That's what Fergie used to tell me that all the time. So every time I'd see Lucien and shake his hand, I'd say, "Fergie says you're the strongest guy that played in the league." So yeah, Lucien's a great guy. I see him around the rinks from time to time. Really, really good person.
Wow, your connection runs deep to a player that I feel bad. I now have to look him up on Hockey DB. Pierre, go have yourself a heck of a Monday.
I will, Dan. It started out well with you. Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate being with you. Thank you.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.